The sound of gunfire echoed through the valley as Catherine Hart raced across the open plain, her chestnut mare straining beneath her. The year was 1879, and the Arizona Territory was unforgiving to those who couldn't keep pace with its savage beauty. Catherine's heart pounded against her ribs as she glanced over her shoulder, seeing the dust cloud of her pursuer growing larger against the bleeding sunset. "Come on, Pepper," she urged her horse, leaning forward in the saddle. "Just a little farther." The abandoned mining settlement of Copper Creek lay just beyond the next ridge. If she could make it there before nightfall, she might find somewhere to hide until her pursuer gave up the chase. Catherine had never imagined that posting a simple advertisement in the Tucson newspaper for a ranch hand would lead to a desperate flight across the desert with a madman on her tail. Behind her, the outlaw known only as Jackson was gaining ground. His reputation had spread throughout the territory like wildfire, a man who took what he wanted and left nothing but sorrow in his wake. 3 days ago, he'd arrived at Catherine's small ranch claiming to answer her advertisement, but his eyes had told a different story. "There's nothing out here for a woman alone," he'd said, his voice sliding like oil over her skin as he dismounted. "Seems to me you'd be better off selling this place." Catherine had refused, of course. The ranch wasn't much, but it was all she had left after her father's passing 6 months prior. She'd worked that land alongside him since she was 12 years old, and at 22, she wasn't about to give it up to the first smooth-talking drifter who came along. That night, Jackson had returned with 2 companions. They'd broken down her door, and Catherine had barely escaped through the back window as they ransacked her home. She'd grabbed her father's rifle and saddled Pepper in record time, but not before hearing Jackson's declaration that he was claiming her ranch and her father's name for himself. "Hart Ranch has a new owner now," he'd called out to the night as Catherine fled, "and I'm the new Hart in these parts." Now, as Copper Creek came into view, Catherine knew she couldn't outrun Jackson forever. She needed help, and she needed it soon. The abandoned mining town was eerily silent as Catherine guided Pepper through the main street. Most of the buildings were weathered husks, their windows long since shattered by storms or vandals. Only the old assayer's office still looked somewhat intact. Catherine dismounted quickly, leading Pepper around to the back of the building. "Easy, girl," she whispered, tying the reins to a rusted water pump. "We'll rest here for a bit." Catherine crept inside the building, rifle ready. Dust motes danced in the dying sunlight that filtered through cracks in the boarded windows. She found a position that would allow her to see anyone approaching from the main road and settled in to wait. Night had nearly fallen when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Catherine tensed, raising her rifle. But instead of Jackson, a lone rider she didn't recognize passed slowly through the town. His hat was pulled low, obscuring his face, but she could see the glint of a silver badge on his chest, a lawman. Perhaps Providence had smiled on her after all. Catherine debated her options. She knew nothing about this man, but Jackson would arrive any minute, and she was running out of choices. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out onto the weathered porch of the assayer's office. "Marshal," she called, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. The rider stopped, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip before he saw her. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the dusty street. "Madam," he said finally, touching the brim of his hat, "bit dangerous for a lady to be out here alone." "I'm Catherine Hart," she said, keeping the rifle visible but not pointed at him, "and I'm in trouble." The lawman dismounted smoothly, leading his horse closer. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, sharp and alert, swept over her disheveled appearance. "Deputy Thomas O'Malley," he introduced himself. "Pima County." "What sort of trouble might that be, Miss Hart?" Before Catherine could answer, the distant sound of hoofbeats made them both freeze. She felt the blood drain from her face. "That would be the trouble," she whispered. "An outlaw named Jackson. He's stolen my ranch, claims he's the new Hart. He's been hunting me for 3 days." O'Malley's expression hardened. "Jackson, I know the name, been looking for him myself." He glanced at Catherine. "Get your horse, we need to move." "Where to? I've got a place. It's not far, but we need to go now." Catherine didn't hesitate. She retrieved Pepper while O'Malley mounted his black stallion. Together, they slipped out the back of Copper Creek just as Jackson and his men entered from the east. They rode hard through the gathering darkness, the moon providing just enough light to avoid the worst of the terrain. O'Malley led her southwest, away from the main trails and deeper into the rocky foothills. After nearly an hour, they approached a small cabin nestled against a cliff face, almost invisible until they were right upon it. "My family's old hunting cabin," O'Malley explained as they dismounted. "No one knows about it except me." Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean, a table and chairs, a small stove, and a single bed in the corner. Catherine sank into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "Thank you," she said simply. O'Malley nodded, busying himself with lighting a lantern and stoking the stove. "You should be safe here for now. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do about Jackson." "He has 2 men with him," Catherine warned, "and they're armed." "So am I," O'Malley replied, his voice calm. "And unlike them, I've got the law on my side." Catherine studied him in the lamplight. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard. His eyes, she now saw, were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. "How did you come to be out here, deputy?" she asked. O'Malley set a pot of coffee on the stove before answering. "Been tracking Jackson for 2 weeks. He robbed the Tucson Bank, killed a teller." His mouth tightened. "The teller was my friend. I'm sorry." "So am I." He poured the coffee into 2 chipped mugs, passing one to Catherine. "Now tell me about your ranch and how Jackson came to claim it." Catherine sipped the strong coffee, gathering her thoughts. "My father built that ranch from nothing. When he died this past winter, I inherited everything. It's not much, 50 head of cattle, the house, a small stream that runs year-round, but it's mine." She described Jackson's arrival, his thinly veiled threats, and his return with his men. "They came at night. I heard them breaking down the door and I ran. Took nothing but Daddy's rifle and Pepper." Her voice broke slightly. Jackson was shouting that he was the new Hart, that the ranch belonged to him now. O'Malley's eyes narrowed. "He's done this before. Finds isolated homesteads, drives off or kills the owners, assumes their identity to sell the property. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, he's long gone." "He can't get away with this," Catherine said fiercely. "He won't," O'Malley promised. "Not this time." They spent the night planning. O'Malley explained that he had been pursuing Jackson alone because the sheriff was occupied with a range war brewing near the Mexican border. Catherine told him everything she knew about her ranch's layout, where Jackson and his men might position themselves, and the best approaches. "We'll need to be careful," O'Malley warned. "Jackson's dangerous when cornered." "So am I," Catherine responded, a steely glint in her eye that made O'Malley look at her with new respect. As the night deepened, they spoke of other things. Catherine learned that O'Malley had come west from Boston 5 years earlier, seeking adventure and finding a calling in law enforcement instead. She told him about growing up on the ranch, learning to rope and ride alongside her father, and her dreams of expanding the herd someday. "You're not what I expected to find out here, Miss Hart," O'Malley said as they prepared to sleep, Catherine taking the bed while he made a pallet on the floor. "Nor you, deputy," she replied softly. "Nor you." Morning came with a clarity that only the desert can bring, the air cool and sharp before the heat of the day settled in. They set out at dawn, taking a circuitous route back toward Catherine's ranch. O'Malley had decided that surprise would be their best advantage. "Jackson won't be expecting you to come back," he explained as they rode. "And he certainly won't be expecting you to bring the law with you." They approached the ranch from the south, using a dry creek bed for cover. As they drew closer, Catherine felt a surge of anger at the sight of smoke rising from her chimney. Jackson had made himself quite at home in her absence. O'Malley signaled for her to stay low as they tied their horses in a sheltered grove of cottonwoods. Together, they crept forward until the ranch house came into clear view. Jackson's men had positioned themselves carelessly, one dozing on the porch, the other tending to horses in the corral. Of Jackson himself, there was no sign. "He's inside," Catherine whispered, pointing to her father's rocking chair visible through the window. "That's his hat on the back of Daddy's chair." O'Malley nodded, his expression grim. Here's what we'll do. I'll take the man on the porch. You circle around to the barn and keep an eye on the one with the horses. If he makes a move to help Jackson, stop him. And Jackson, once I have the first man secured, I'll call Jackson out. He doesn't know I'm here, so he'll be caught off guard." O'Malley's eyes met hers. "I need you to stay hidden unless things go badly." "Can you do that?" Catherine wanted to protest, to insist on confronting Jackson herself, but she knew O'Malley's plan made sense. She nodded reluctantly. "Be careful," she said, touching his arm briefly before slipping away toward the barn. Catherine positioned herself behind a stack of hay bales with a clear view of the corral. O'Malley, meanwhile, had worked his way around to approach the house from the front, keeping low until he was almost at the steps. Then, in one fluid motion, he stood and leveled his revolver at the dozing guard. "Don't move," he ordered, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. The man on the porch jerked awake, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun. O'Malley fired a warning shot that splintered the wood beside the man's head. "Next one won't miss," O'Malley warned. "Hands up." At the corral, the second man had drawn his gun at the sound of the shot. Catherine steadied her rifle, sighting along the barrel as the man looked wildly around for the source of the commotion. "Jackson," the man shouted. "We've got company." The front door of the ranch house burst open, and Jackson himself appeared, a revolver in each hand. He fired blindly at O'Malley, forcing the deputy to dive for cover behind the water trough. Catherine saw the man at the corral taking aim at O'Malley's position. Without hesitation, she fired, her bullet striking the man's shoulder. He cried out, dropping his gun and falling to his knees. The sound of Catherine's shot drew Jackson's attention. He turned toward the barn, his face contorted with rage when he spotted her. "You," he snarled, "should have known you'd be too stubborn to die easy." "This is my ranch, Jackson," Catherine called back, chambering another round. "And I'm taking it back." Jackson laughed, an ugly sound. "You and what army, little Hart?" "The law," O'Malley answered, rising from behind the trough with his revolver trained on Jackson. "Drop those guns or the next bullet's between your eyes." For a moment, it seemed Jackson might surrender. Then, with a sudden movement, he fired at O'Malley. The deputy returned fire as Catherine took aim at Jackson from her position. The outlaw staggered as both bullets found their mark, one in his chest, the other in his leg. Jackson fell to his knees, his guns dropping from nerveless fingers. O'Malley approached cautiously, kicking the weapons away before checking the man's wounds. "He'll live," O'Malley announced, though without much satisfaction. "Long enough to hang anyway." The aftermath was a blur of activity. O'Malley secured Jackson and his men, using rope from the barn to bind them until transport could be arranged. Catherine moved through her house, setting right what the outlaws had disturbed. The place had been ransacked but not destroyed, and for that, at least, she was grateful. "I'll need to ride to the nearest telegraph office," O'Malley told her as evening approached. "Send word to the sheriff about our prisoners." Catherine nodded, suddenly reluctant to see him go, even temporarily. In the short time they'd known each other, something had shifted between them, a connection forged in danger and mutual respect. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. O'Malley's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Yes, Miss Hart, I will." "Catherine," she corrected. "I think we're past formalities, don't you, deputy?" A smile tugged at his lips. "Thomas," he said. "And yes, I suppose we are." Thomas returned the following day with a wagon and 2 deputies to transport Jackson and his men to Tucson. The wounded outlaw glared venomously at Catherine as he was loaded into the wagon. "This ain't over, Hart," Jackson spat. "Men like me, we don't stay locked up for long." "It's over for you," Thomas replied coldly. "The only place you're headed is the gallows." As the wagon pulled away, Catherine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Her home was hers again, her father's name restored. And yet, something else pulled at her, the knowledge that Thomas would soon return to his duties in Tucson, leaving her alone once more. "Will you be all right here?" Thomas asked that evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "I've been managing on my own for months," Catherine reminded him, though her heart wasn't in the assertion. "I'll be fine." Thomas was silent for a long moment. "You know, I've been thinking," Jackson and his kind prey on folks who are isolated, vulnerable. He turned to face her directly. Have you considered hiring actual ranch hands, real ones this time? Catherine sighed. I've considered it, but trustworthy help is hard to find and I can't afford to pay much. What if I knew someone you could trust implicitly? She raised an eyebrow. And who might that be? Me, Thomas said simply. Catherine stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You. But you're a deputy. Thomas smiled ruefully. Was a deputy. I handed in my badge today. Why would you do that? Because chasing outlaws across the territory isn't the life I want anymore. His gaze was steady, unwavering. Catherine, I've never met anyone like you. Your courage, your determination, you're extraordinary. Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. Thomas, we barely know each other. I know enough, he replied. I know that when I rode into Copper Creek 3 days ago, I was tired, bitter, ready to give up the badge even then. And then I met you, and suddenly I had a purpose again. He took her hand gently. I'm not asking for anything except a chance to stay, to help you rebuild this place, to see if what I'm feeling might grow into something more. Catherine looked down at their joined hands, her heart racing. She had learned to be cautious, to rely on herself alone, but Thomas was different from any man she'd ever known. I could use the help, she admitted finally, looking up to meet his eyes. And I'd like you to stay, Thomas, very much. His smile was like the breaking of dawn across the desert, warm, bright, full of promise. Then I'll stay, Catherine Hart, for as long as you'll have me. In the weeks that followed, they fell into a rhythm of work and companionship. Thomas proved himself invaluable around the ranch, repairing fences, rounding up stray cattle, and reinforcing the house against both weather and potential intruders. Catherine found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, admiring the easy strength with which he moved, the gentleness he showed to the animals, the quiet competence he brought to every task. They took their meals together, talking late into the evening. Catherine learned about Thomas's childhood in Boston, his stern father who had wanted him to enter law or medicine, his decision to head west against his family's wishes. Thomas, in turn, discovered Catherine's love of books, her dream of breeding horses someday, her fierce attachment to the land her father had loved. He would have liked you, she told Thomas one evening as they watched a summer storm rolling across the plains. My father. He always said the measure of a man wasn't in his words but in his actions. I wish I could have met him, Thomas replied. He raised a remarkable daughter. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. They had maintained a careful distance, despite living under the same roof, Thomas sleeping in the small bunkhouse while Catherine kept to her father's house. But with each passing day, the attraction between them grew harder to ignore. It was Catherine who finally bridged the gap between them. A month after Thomas's arrival, she rode out to check on a pregnant heifer and returned to find him chopping wood, his shirt discarded in the summer heat. She reined Pepper to a halt, momentarily transfixed by the play of muscles across his back and shoulders as he worked. Thomas turned at the sound of hoofbeats, wiping sweat from his brow. Everything all right with the heifer? Fine, Catherine managed, dismounting. She hasn't calved yet, but it won't be long now. She led Pepper to the water trough, acutely aware of Thomas watching her. When she turned back to him, he hadn't moved, his eyes following her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Thomas, she said softly, I think we need to talk. He set the axe down, reaching for his shirt but stopping when she shook her head slightly. About what? He asked, though his eyes suggested he knew perfectly well. Catherine took a step toward him, then another. About this, she said, gesturing between them. About what's happening here. Thomas remained still, letting her come to him. And what is happening here, Catherine? She stopped just before him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. I think you know, I think we both do. His voice was rough when he spoke. I've tried to be respectful, to give you space, time, I know, she whispered, and I appreciate that. But I don't need any more time, Thomas. I know what I want. And what do you want? He asked, his hands lifting hesitantly to rest at her waist. Catherine looked up at him, all caution abandoned. You, she said simply. I want you. The kiss, when it came, was like coming home after a long journey. His lips were warm and sure against hers, his arms drawing her closer until there was no space between them. Catherine wound her arms around his neck, giving herself over to the sensation of being held, wanted, cherished. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Thomas rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I've wanted to do that since the day I met you," he confessed. Catherine smiled, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "What took you so long, deputy?" His answering laugh was low and warm. "Waiting for the right moment, I suppose. And I'm not a deputy anymore, remember?" "No," she agreed, kissing him again briefly. "You're something much better. You're mine." The days that followed were the happiest Catherine had known since her father's death. Thomas moved from the bunkhouse to the main house, sharing her bed and her life. They worked side by side, equal partners in the running of the ranch. The autumn cattle drive brought enough money to hire 2 more hands, allowing them to expand their operation as Catherine had always dreamed. News reached them in October that Jackson had been tried and hanged for his crimes. The letter from the sheriff brought a sense of closure, though neither Catherine nor Thomas celebrated the man's death. "Justice, not vengeance," Thomas said quietly after reading the letter. "That's what separates us from men like him." Catherine nodded, leaning into his embrace. "I'm just glad it's truly over, that we can look forward now, not back." "Speaking of looking forward," Thomas said, a hint of nervousness in his voice, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Catherine pulled back slightly to look at him. "What is it?" Thomas reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring, a simple gold band with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "She gave it to me before I left Boston, said I should save it for when I found the right woman." His eyes met hers, full of love and hope. "I found her, Catherine, I found you." Tears sprang to Catherine's eyes as Thomas knelt before her. "Catherine Hart, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, grow old with me, face whatever comes our way together?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, Thomas O'Malley, I will marry you." They were married on Christmas Day, 1879, in the small church in Tucson. The ranch hands and a few friends from town attended, along with the sheriff who had pursued Jackson alongside Thomas. Catherine wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a cedar chest, while Thomas donned a new suit ordered from back east. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises of love and fidelity that both knew they would keep until death parted them. As they exchanged rings, Catherine thought of how close she had come to losing everything: her ranch, her father's name, perhaps even her life. Instead, she had gained something precious beyond measure: a partner, a lover, a friend. The winter passed in contentment, the newlyweds finding joy in the simple rhythms of ranch life and in each other. When spring arrived, bringing new calves and fresh green grass, Catherine discovered she was with child. "Are you happy?" she asked Thomas as they lay in bed one night, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Are you?" Catherine thought of the long journey that had brought them together, the fear, the danger, the loss, and then the hope, the healing, the love. "Yes," she said, turning in his arms to kiss him properly. "Completely happy." As their kiss deepened, Catherine silently thanked fate for sending an outlaw to steal her horse and her name, and for sending a cowboy determined enough to help her take them both back. For in losing and reclaiming what was hers, she had found something infinitely more valuable: a love to last a lifetime. Summer bloomed across the ranch, the days growing longer and hotter as Catherine's belly swelled with their child. Thomas fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest during the heat of the day and take on fewer chores. "I'm with child, not made of glass," she reminded him one afternoon as he tried to take a basket of laundry from her hands. "Humor me," he replied, stealing a kiss as he relieved her of the basket. "I just want to take care of you both." Catherine relented, touched by his concern even as she chafed slightly at the restrictions. She had never been one to sit idle, and pregnancy hadn't changed that aspect of her nature. Still, she found other ways to occupy herself, keeping the ranch accounts, planning improvements for the house, preparing for the baby's arrival. In July, a letter arrived from Boston. Thomas opened it with trepidation. He hadn't heard from his family since informing them of his marriage months earlier. "It's from my mother," he said, scanning the pages. She wants to come visit, to meet you and be here when the baby arrives. Catherine watched his face carefully. How do you feel about that? Thomas considered the question. I'd like you to meet her. She's nothing like my father, warmer, more understanding. He looked up from the letter. But only if you're comfortable with it. This is your home, Catherine. Our home, she corrected gently. And I'd be happy to meet your mother. Family is important, Thomas. I know how much I miss my father still. The decision made, Thomas sent a reply inviting his mother to visit. Eleanor O'Malley arrived in early August, a dignified woman with Thomas's blue eyes and an unexpected willingness to adapt to ranch life. Catherine, initially nervous about meeting her mother-in-law, found herself warming quickly to Eleanor's direct manner and genuine interest in the ranch. He writes that you're quite the horsewoman, Eleanor commented one morning as they shared coffee on the porch, watching Thomas and the hands move cattle to a new pasture. Said you rode like the wind the day he met you. Catherine smiled at the memory. I was running for my life that day. It tends to improve one's riding form. Eleanor studied her with shrewd eyes. You're exactly what he needed, you know. Thomas was always searching for something purpose, meaning. In his letters this past year, I finally heard contentment in his words. He's given me just as much, Catherine replied. Security, partnership. She placed a hand on her rounded belly. A future, Eleanor nodded, satisfied. That's as it should be between husband and wife, a true matching of strengths. The older woman stayed for a month, helping prepare the nursery and sharing stories of Thomas's childhood that made Catherine laugh until tears streamed down her face. When it came time for her to return east, she promised to visit again after the baby was born. You have a good life here, Eleanor told Catherine as they said their goodbyes. I'm glad my son found his way to you. So am I, Catherine replied, embracing her mother-in-law warmly. September brought cooler temperatures and the imminent arrival of their child. Catherine grew increasingly uncomfortable, her back aching constantly as the baby seemed determined to press against her spine. Not much longer now, the local midwife assured her during a visit. That baby's dropped already, I'd say within the week. Thomas redoubled his hovering after that pronouncement, rarely leaving Catherine's side. She endured his protective behavior with good humor, knowing it stemmed from love and concern. What shall we name the baby? She asked one evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset. We should decide before he or she arrives. Thomas considered the question. If it's a boy, perhaps James, after your father, Catherine smiled, pleased by the suggestion. I'd like that. And if it's a girl, Eleanor, after my mother, Thomas suggested, though we could call her Ellie. James or Ellie, Catherine tested the names aloud. Both good, strong names. The baby, however, had plans of its own. That very night, Catherine woke to a sharp pain and the unmistakable sensation of wetness beneath her. She nudged Thomas awake, remarkably calm despite the circumstances. It's time, she told him. The baby's coming. What followed was a blur of activity, Thomas riding to fetch the midwife while one of the ranch hands rode for the doctor in town, just in case. By the time both arrived, Catherine's labor was well advanced, her contractions coming hard and fast. This little one's in a hurry, the midwife observed, checking Catherine's progress. Won't be long now. Thomas paced outside the bedroom door, having been banished by the midwife despite his protests. He winced at each of Catherine's cries, feeling utterly helpless. First babies often come quick like this, the doctor assured him. Your wife is young and strong. She'll be fine. After what seemed an eternity but was in fact just under 3 hours, a new cry joined Catherine's, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Thomas froze, his heart pounding as the midwife opened the door, her face wreathed in smiles. Congratulations, Mr. O'Malley, she said. You have a healthy daughter. Thomas entered the room on unsteady legs to find Catherine propped against pillows, flushed and exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. Come meet your daughter, she invited, her voice hoarse but happy. Thomas approached the bed as if in a dream, sinking down beside his wife and peering at the tiny, red-faced infant. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and when she briefly opened her eyes, they were the deep blue of all newborns. She's perfect, he whispered, reaching out a tentative finger to touch his daughter's miniature hand. The baby instinctively grasped his finger, her grip surprisingly strong. Ellie, Catherine said softly. Ellie O'Malley, do you like it? I love it, Thomas replied, his voice thick with emotion. He leaned forward to kiss Catherine's forehead, then her lips. And I love you, both of you. The days that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment as they learned to care for their new daughter. Ellie proved to be a good-natured baby, with a healthy appetite and a propensity for sleeping soundly at night, much to her parents' relief. She has your eyes, Catherine observed one afternoon as Thomas held the baby. Ellie's newborn blue had indeed begun to shift toward the clear azure of her father's gaze. And your spirit, I think, Thomas replied, watching as Ellie waved her tiny fists. She's going to be as determined as her mother, Catherine laughed. Heaven help us all if that's true. As autumn deepened into winter, the little family settled into a new routine. The ranch continued to prosper, the additional hands Thomas had hired proving their worth many times over. Catherine gradually resumed her duties, Ellie often strapped to her chest in a sling as she went about her work. We should expand next year, Thomas suggested one evening as they reviewed the ranch accounts. Buy that parcel of land to the north that Johnson's looking to sell. It's got good water and grazing. Ambitious, Catherine noted, but I like the idea. This place was always meant to grow. They celebrated Ellie's first Christmas with simple gifts and grateful hearts, marveling at how much their lives had changed in a single year. As they sat before the fire, Ellie sleeping peacefully between them, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. I never imagined this, she confessed, gesturing to their cozy home, their sleeping daughter. After Father died, I thought I'd spend my life alone, just trying to hold on to this place. Thomas reached across Ellie to take Catherine's hand, and I never imagined finding a home, not really. I thought I'd spend my life chasing outlaws across the territory, always moving, never settling. His thumb traced circles on her palm. We saved each other, I think. We did, Catherine agreed, thinking of that desperate day when she'd fled Jackson, when Thomas had appeared like an answer to an unspoken prayer. Though I did most of the work, she added with a teasing smile. Thomas laughed softly. You certainly did, I just followed where you led. As snow fell gently outside, they shared a look of perfect understanding, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it most. Spring returned to the ranch, bringing with it Ellie's first birthday and news that Catherine was expecting again. Thomas received the announcement with equal parts joy and concern. Are you sure you're ready? Ellie's still so young. Catherine placed his hand on her still flat stomach. Life doesn't always wait for us to be ready, Thomas. But yes, I am. Our family is growing just like our ranch. It feels right. The second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Catherine knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was too busy with Ellie and the ranch to dwell on discomforts. By summer, her condition was obvious, and Ellie had taken to patting her mother's growing belly with curious hands. Baby, she would say, one of her first clear words, making both parents beam with pride. That's right, sweetheart, Catherine would reply. Your brother or sister is in there, growing strong just like you. In September of 1881, James Thomas O'Malley made his entrance into the world, a sturdy boy with Catherine's dark hair and thoughtful expression. Ellie, at first uncertain about this new addition, soon appointed herself her brother's protector and constant companion. Never a dull moment now, Thomas observed one evening as he helped Catherine bathe the children. James splashed contentedly while Ellie helped by getting water everywhere. Would you have it any other way? Catherine asked, knowing the answer already. Not for all the world, Thomas replied, leaning over to kiss her, heedless of the water soaking into his shirt as Ellie squealed in delight. The years passed in a happy progression of seasons and milestones. The ranch prospered, eventually becoming one of the largest and most successful in the territory. Thomas and Catherine added a significant addition to the house as their family grew, eventually welcoming a third child, Sarah Eleanor, in the spring of 1884. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, learning to ride almost before they could walk. developing the same connection to the land that Catherine had inherited from her father. Thomas taught them about justice and compassion, while Catherine instilled in them her love of books and her fierce independence. Occasionally, news would reach them of other outlaws who had met justice, reminding them of their own brush with danger years before. But such reminders were increasingly rare as Arizona grew more settled, law and order gradually replacing the wild justice of earlier days. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Thomas surprised Catherine with a gift: a new mare, a beautiful palomino with a flowing mane and gentle eyes. To replace Pepper, he explained as Catherine admired the horse. Pepper had died 2 winters past, leaving Catherine bereft at the loss of her faithful companion. I know she can't truly be replaced, but I thought perhaps it was time. Catherine stroked the mare's velvety nose, already feeling a connection. She's beautiful, Thomas. What's her name? That's for you to decide, he said. She's yours. After a moment's consideration, Catherine smiled. Hope, she decided. Her name is Hope. Perfect, Thomas agreed, wrapping his arms around his wife as they watched the mare explore her new home. Like everything else about our life together. That evening, after the children were asleep, they sat on the porch as they had so many nights before, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Catherine leaned against Thomas's shoulder, content in the quiet moment. Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out? She asked, if Jackson hadn't come, if you hadn't been pursuing him, if we hadn't met in that abandoned town. Thomas considered the question. Sometimes, he admitted. But then I look at you, at our children, at everything we've built together, and I can't imagine any other path that could have led to such happiness. Catherine turned her face up to his, the years having only deepened her love for this man who had helped her reclaim her life and then shared it with her so completely. I knew that day in Copper Creek, she said softly. When you appeared like some avenging angel, I knew my life had changed forever. I just didn't realize how much better it would become. Thomas drew her closer, his kiss a promise renewed. The day an outlaw took your horse and your name was the luckiest day of my life, he murmured against her lips. Because it gave me the chance to find you, to fall in love with you, to build this life with you. Our life, Catherine corrected gently. The one we fought for, the one we made together. As the desert night deepened around them, they sat wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that what they had found together, love, family, purpose, was worth every hardship they had endured to claim it. An outlaw had once taken Catherine's horse and her name, but Thomas had helped her take them back, and in doing so, had given her his heart. In the vast tapestry of the Arizona territory, their story was but a single thread, yet for Catherine and Thomas, it was the most important story ever told their own.